it's quite an irony to be on the same stage with Mr. Poon, because he's the founding director of IJM, and I had an experience both with IJM connected to TALAM. Then we are talking about TALAM tonight, because you know, I was working in London before I came back to Malaysia. So about a year before I came back, that was 2001, 2002, I wanted to buy a property. You know, it's a normal thing. Among the first thing you would buy is a cheap property as a recently graduated student. So from London, I searched on the internet. You know, very bad advice. Next time, if you want to buy property, go and visit it. Don't buy on the internet. Because when I did it on the internet, I searched on the internet, I came across most of the projects in KL and Selangor at that time. Most were developed by TALAM. So I ended up buying a TALAM property. Bad pains. So I bought a TALAM property in 2002, paid the down payment and so on. 6 years later, 2008, it was still under construction. So, you know, I was paying the interest through my nose years after years. Then came IJM, the savior, because we actually had to appoint IJM to take over the project, at least the parcel of our project, to complete it. But in the process, we had to pay IJM, and we had to forfeit our LAD, which means that basically I lost about 100 grand altogether. So that's why it's quite an irony to be on the same stage with the founding member of IJM, now talking about TALAM. Alright. You know, I would like to take where YB Siva left off when it comes to TALAM. You know, there has been a lot of allegations, a lot of confusion, manufactured confusion by MCA especially, that this is a 1 billion scandal. The question that has been repeated over and over again, why was it that state government of Selangor has to acquire the debts of TALAM in order to complete the whole debt restructuring? Now let me pin, I have to give you some other facts which perhaps have not been forthcoming in the media. There were several debts. When we took over, Pakatan Rakyat took over Selangor in 2008, when, as YB Siva pointed out, we listed down all the debts and amounts due from TALAM to state subsidiaries, we realized that most of these debts arise from failed joint ventures. These are basically where TALAM entered a joint venture with a state subsidiary. State subsidiary give the land to TALAM, and TALAM was supposed to develop it. In the end, most of it failed. So state subsidiaries didn't get the payment nor the profit from the development. Because of that, the debts due from TALAM to the state subsidiaries have a very low priority or ranking in terms of the rank of all debts. If you liquidate a company, when an administrator comes in, when they start selling all the assets in order to pay the creditors, the money will go first to banks, to your buyers for liquidated damages and so on. Usually the last person which will have any claim to the amount is actually your joint venture partner. So unless something is done, a debt restructuring is introduced to the whole mess, basically the state will not get anything of that almost 1 billion assets that have been given to TALAM over the years. This we have to understand, because this is where a lot of people, especially UMNO and MCA people, don't understand. And I don't blame them, you know. But this is the genius of Tan Sri Khalid. There are many things that we disagree with him, but in this particular restructuring, we have to take the hats off, because he knew what needs to be done in order to upgrade the rank of these amounts due to the state from being a joint venture debt which has no value commercially, upgraded to become a first rank creditors and A+ rank pari passu with all the other creditors. And that's why I have to do it. We had to buy, so-called, to do the round tripping, we have to consolidate the whole debt into one state subsidiary, and then the state actually buys that debt in a transaction that only lasts about 4 hours. This is the same, more or less, along the same manner that Tan Sri Khalid did the dawn raid on Guthrie. Basically, you just do a round tripping, take the money from CIMB, put it through the books, and return the money to CIMB without a single cent being owed by the state to CIMB. But in the process of doing that, because the debt now is recorded as the debts due to the state of Selangor, the rank has been upgraded into a first rank debt. And that is where then we can recover it, because when we go to court, the debt has value. You can pursue the debt in court, as opposed to before this. That's why if you ask Barisan Nasional, they just don't know how to do it. Because as far as they are concerned, those are not debts, those were losses from JV ventures. You know? So we have converted losses into debts that then you can, and that was how Tan Sri Khalid and the state managed to bring TALAM to the negotiating table, untwist them and get them to sign the full settlement agreement, which is about this thing. And the full settlement agreement involves all the parties from the state, all the TALAM and their subsidiaries, and most importantly, which MCA always failed to mention, especially the banks. Because TALAM actually took money from banks, and these banks actually use your money and my money to give loans to TALAM, and unless TALAM can settle these debts, basically those debts will become bad debts, become losses to the banks, which will eventually affect your money and my money. So that's why it's very important. I would like to just point out 3 things. 3 takeaways out of the debt restructuring exercise that the Selangor government has done. Number 1, we had recovered fully the 392 million, which in the minds of Barisan Nasional, in their book, those are all losses. Those are not debts. We converted losses into debts, and using those money, we have been able to do in Selangor an array of welfare programs. That's why we could give 1,500 to people going to universities. We could give 2,500 to poor, sickly, no, not poor, everyone actually, to warga emas. We could bring warga emas for shopping. All these actually was paid from the 392 million, which was recovered from that exercise. That's number 1. Number 2, the state had also recovered a massive land banks to the size of 4,000 acres, which was previously given just like that to TALAM, which TALAM had taken and mortgaged to the banks. This is where MCA had tried their best to confuse, but I think they got confused themselves. You know, they are saying is that the state has built out TALAM because we pay and settle to the banks. You know, supposedly we save TALAM in this exercise. What they forget was that out of that 4,000 acres of land, about more than 3/4 of them had been mortgaged by TALAM to the banks. You know, even if we recovered the 50-60 million cash, that would be nowhere near to get the settlement, and more so, all these 4,000 acres of land would be just lost from the state. At the time when a lot of the state subsidiaries and the state itself does not have a lot more land banks for us to do affordable housing and so on in Selangor. Lands in Selangor are extremely expensive, and Barisan Nasional has been giving out these lands to cronies for the last 50 years. There's not much land in Selangor anymore. So it was very important for us to recover the 4,000 acres of land. And for us to do that, we had to settle with the banks. You had to be fair to the banks that they had given the money. Fair enough that TALAM had swindled this money and did whatever they needed to do with the money. But if the state were to resolve this, we had to settle with the bank. And the full settlement agreement allowed for the banks to take haircut and for the state to settle in many ways. But at the end of the day, what is most important is that in exchange for the about 266 million settlement that the state would have to settle with the banks, we got 4,000 acres of land back from the bank free of encumbrances, which at the current valuation, with the current GDP, those lands are worth about 2 or 3 billion. So we recovered 392 million cash in property, in value, in property and so on. We also had a land bank that now, if we were to develop and we open tender and sell, the estimated GDP is between 2 to 3 billion ringgit. And you must remember, you know, in Selangor, we are facing acute affordable housing problems. The key contributor to this is actually unavailability of land. Unless the state has adequate land banks, there's not much that we could do within our financial muscle to provide affordable housing to the public. We need the land, and now we got the land. Not only we can monetize this to 2 or 3 billion ringgit, we could use some of the money and the land banks in order to pump into market more supply of affordable housing, which hopefully will balance out with the private sector, and that in the long run will lower down prices of houses, especially for the young people and low income families. That's very important. And the third key takeaways, as I mentioned before, is that we had done our obligation to the bank and depositors. Because instead of all this money and loans, about 266 million being written off completely because of, at that time, TALAM was already PN17, an insolvent company with no value whatsoever. If we just leave it like that, that means that 266 million for the depositors will just be gone. And I have to also stress out that it is also in the public interest to make sure that some portion of TALAM, irrespective of their previous track record, some portion of it remains solvent so that they could complete other housing projects that they still owe to the public. I was a victim of abandoned housing. I know how it felt. You could not just leave about thousands of buyers who have bought houses from TALAM, who are still paying interest monthly. You could not just be complicit and say, I'm sorry TALAM, you could just bungkus, let them do whatever they need with their loans. You can't. So it was in our interest as well to settle with the bank, so long as the bank was willing to take the haircut, and at the same time, force TALAM to rationalize its assets and operation so that it become a company now which is called Trinity Corporation, solely concentrating to finish the housing projects that they owe to the public. So, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's something which all of us in Selangor are proud of. The problem was MCA and UMNO and IMC just couldn't understand the whole thing. I mean, Chua Tiyong is a chartered accountant. I mean, so he say lah, he goes down and says he's a chartered accountant. It's an insult to my profession because I'm also a chartered accountant. I suppose the only difference was that I could count and he couldn't. And I just cannot understand how somebody of his stature, who supposedly had been a CFO of a quite large organization, could not understand that when you recover a 392 million debt, when you recover a land bank of 4,000 acres with a potential development value of 2 to 3 billion, that's not a scandal. That's a big achievement. He took it and I don't know how he calculated it. He said that the 600 million plus the 392 million is a 1 billion scandal. That's how he presented it. If you look at it in mathematics, it is as if Chua Tiyong has said 1 plus 1 is equal minus 50. That's his calculation. I understand he wanted to be a good MP, fair enough. He wanted to look after the interests of the public. Fair enough. He said that he wanted to make sure that every single cent of public's money goes back to the public. Fair enough. My only advice to Chua Ti Yong is that he is better off chasing the cows from NFC. Chua Ti Yong is actually Deputy Minister of Agriculture. It is in his responsibility to make sure that every single cent of the 250 million is recovered back. And until now, we have not seen a single cent. In fact, I know NFC has been using that money to sue me. So, I mean, if he's really serious, he should go to each and every condo, get the condo, chase the cows out of the condo, and make sure we get the condo back. That's on TALAM. I think it's very straightforward. I think for the lack of any issues in Selangor, they just single out TALAM, knowing that it's very complicated. I think it's just because BN was banking on that the whole TALAM transactions would be too complicated for the public. And they think that when they continue with their misinformation campaign on TV, it will confuse the public so much that they will just point fingers to Barisan Nasional. I tell you what, I think they really underestimated the public. The public understood the issue. The public can count, unlike Barisan Nasional, and that's why, as YB Siva has said, I think the issue has backfired greatly. Because I think now people can see how in the past 50 years, Barisan Nasional has been giving lands almost free of charge to their cronies. And when you go back to areas like Kota Damansara, to Subang Jaya and all those areas, those were all state lands that were given to people connected to Barisan Nasional with peanuts returns to the state, but in the end it created a lot of rich Malaysians, be either Chinese, Malay, Indians, don't matter, so long as they are golf baggies to the people in power. That's what TALAM scandal has highlighted to the public. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to continue a bit on water. I had the unenviable opportunity to be on the negotiating team with SYABAS. I was representing the state for a while during our negotiation for the water takeover against SYABAS. Now, SYABAS has now maintained that Selangor will face water crisis by 2015 if Langat 2 is not done. You know, we know from YB Siva's number that Selangor now has overcapacity of water processing plants of 20%. So the real bottleneck of the water going from water processing plants to the industries and housing estates is not actually at the water treatment plants. The bottleneck is actually with the distribution system. Who looks after the distribution system? Who looks after the pipe? Who was supposed to have a comprehensive pipe replacement program for the last 15 years, which they did not? It was SYABAS. So the real problem is, even if there is a water crisis, so to speak, in Selangor, the real problem and responsibility lies squarely with SYABAS. It's got nothing to do with the public nor the water processing plants, because the dams are full with water. The water processing plants are running at 20% over capacity. The problem is because SYABAS, especially the chairman, Tan Sri Rosali Ismail, had been abusing his position to fund political parties, especially UMNO. He basically took money from public to SYABAS and paid a lot of people in UMNO and fund a lot of activities in UMNO that deprived SYABAS of the financial capacity to carry out the pipe replacement program. That is why now Selangor has 32% non-revenue water leakages. Basically, and due to its own failure, SYABAS then used that excuse, as well as because of the state's refusal to grant them tariff hike. They used these two excuses to withhold payments to the tunes of billions to the water treatment plants. They collect money from all of us in Selangor. You know, we continue to pay. The industry continue to pay, but instead of taking this money and pay the water treatment plants, what they did was they just keep the money to themselves. This is why I took a very strong stand, and I'm not afraid even if SYABAS sue me again, because I'm sure if I got fined, I can join Tony Pua and raise the money RM1 one each. That is why I dare say that SYABAS is colluding with Barisan Nasional to manufacture a water crisis in Selangor, to give the impression to the public that things are really bad in Selangor. If you look, if you watch TV lah, if you watch RTM 1, TV3, I'm sure most of you don't, but in case you watch, living in Selangor, it's like living in Somalia. No water, garbage not collected, tak ada orang kutip sampah, and then potholes everywhere. Students cannot go to school, university closed down. I mean, you look at TV, I feel like, this is, and I've been to Somalia from my time in Petronas. It is like, it really sounds like Somalia living in Selangor. Because that's what SYABAS and Barisan Nasional and Alam Flora before were trying to do. They were trying to portray a very bad situation in Selangor, not only for the voters in Selangor, but also for the rest of the country, as if everything is failing in Selangor. That's why they are complicit to manufacture a water crisis, because every indicator, from the water dam level to the capacity of water treatment plants to treat water, to the non-revenue water rate that they are operating, everything is pointing to their failure to look after the distribution system, not lack of water, nor the unavailability of water processing capacity. So that's why I said to Tan Sri Rosali, look, if you say that you have to withhold payments to the water processing plants because you say that you are in trouble financially because you could not raise tariff and so on, the first thing that you should do as a responsible private and corporate citizen is to basically forego your 4 to 5 million salary every year. You should forego. In Malaysia, in the world, you can find a company that is bleeding to its knees financially, but the executive chairman still takes one of the highest pay in the country, if not the region. And not to mention, there are two entities controlled by Tan Sri Rosali. Number one is SYABAS, which is a public listed company. The other one is Puncak Niaga. And Puncak Niaga, some of Puncak Niaga's expenses are not known to all of us because this is private holding. Let me tell you this, about 2 months back, some of the disgruntled general managers from Puncak Niaga, and Rosali has a lot of general managers, about 20 general managers looking after all his private affairs, not company's affairs. Some of these disgruntled general managers came to see me. They were disgruntled because instead of doing real corporate work at Puncak Niaga, they were asked by Tan Sri Rosali to organize his daughter's wedding. Not the first one, the third one already, the bigger wedding has been organized by these GMs. So they're really not happy because they were corporate people, accountants, corporate planner. Instead of doing real corporate work, they have been asked by Rosali to plan for his daughter's wedding, which cost 5 million being paid for by Puncak Niaga. 5 million ringgit. That's why if you ask Sami Value will say 3 million, my daughter's wedding is very cheap lah, compared to 5 million Rosali punya. Yeah? So this 5 Finally, these 3 GMs came to see me, and then they started to list down all the things that we never know before, how Rosali led a very luxurious life at the expense of taxpayers. Number 1, he had 3 multi-million bungalows in Taman Tun Dr. Ismail. Okay, that's not the surprise, that's not the catch. The catch is, these 3 multi-million bungalows are not inhabited by any human beings. Those bungalows are used to park his luxury cars. 3 multi-million bungalows used solely to park his luxury cars. Bentley, all the sports cars. And then he also has private jets, where he jets off anywhere in the world, but most of the time his private jet is being used by politicians, the highest of the highest politicians, to go shopping. You tahu lah siapa? I don't have to name them now. You know, the really highest of the highest person who likes shopping. And he usually uses, she usually uses Tan Sri Rosali's private jet to go shopping. And these again are being paid for by Puncak Niaga, partly through the money from SYABAS, being paid for by the public because of the water tariff. Reporter! You see, so all these things, the 3 GMs promised to give me evidences, hard evidences to show how Tan Sri Rosali had used the money from the concession primarily to fund his really luxurious lifestyle. The problem was, because of Barisan Nasional's prosecution and persecution of whistleblowers, after the first meeting, I keep calling and they say, we tak berani lah by now, we tak berani. So all I get are those words from them and some spreadsheets without real, I wanted document and evidence and invoices. But these are coming from the inner circles of Tan Sri Rosali himself. So, you know, if you look at all this, it's very clear that SYABAS has a lot of money. SYABAS has more than enough money to carry out the pipe replacement program if they are serious about looking after the welfare of Selangorians and people in Kelantan. It's also clear that SYABAS and Tan Sri Rosali uses the concession basically to profit personally and to help people in power connected. But most importantly, I would like to remind all of us, another 5 minutes and then I'll end. Whatever is happening in Selangor now, with the so-called water crisis, with the impending so-called shortage of water in Selangor in 2015. This is not the first time that Malaysia is being blackmailed with this kind of episode. If you remember 1996 period, all of us, I'm sure, all of us were here in 1996. Malaysia went through exactly the same episode of blackmail and counter-blackmail, not about water, but with regards to the electricity supply. We have gone down this road. In 1996, there was 1 or 2 national level blackout. The people in power, especially Tun Mahathir at that time, very quickly put the blame and point fingers to TNB, Tan Sri Rosali, supposedly for their failure, but also supposedly because of the lack of capacity of electricity capacity in the country. Out of that manufactured episode, between 1996 up to now, Malaysia has dished out lucrative independent power producers concessions, almost about 15 of them. The first generation concession given to the closest of the closest to the ruling Barisan Nasional, to YTL, to Genting, to Malakoff and a few others. The first of these first generation IPPs are the most lucrative. The kind of returns have not been seen ever, not just in Malaysia but also in other countries that have IPPs. So do you see the trend? The trend is, first they will orchestrate a crisis because they want to blackmail the public and influence the public opinion to support a certain privatization move. And then they will give and dish out these concessions and license to as many people as possible, so long as these people can somehow benefit them in return, that in the end, by 2011, my friends, Malaysia has a spare capacity of electricity generation of about 40%, one of the highest in the world. America has a spare capacity of 25%. Australia has a spare capacity of 25%. And the spare capacity usually, I did my degree in electrical engineering, although I never practiced. So I do understand bits and pieces about spare capacity and so on. Usually you plan spare capacity not so much about the total consumption, but also the spike. You know, you want to accommodate the spike, the surge of electrical demand at any. That's the surge. Yeah. If you compare Malaysia and US and Australia, which countries are more industrialized? Which countries have more prone to having a surge in demand? Definitely not Malaysia. Definitely America and Australia are more prone to a sudden demand in electricity, a sudden surge in electricity demand. But they can survive with 25% spare capacity without any untoward or major industrial disruptions in the last 20 years, except for the California episode. Beyond that, America and Australia did pretty well with only 25%. Malaysia has 40% spare capacity because of the licenses of the IPPs, and we have been paying through the nose. We have subsidized our electricity to the tune of almost 12 to 13 billion every year, but still our electricity tariff is still more expensive in comparison to Thailand, which has no subsidy whatsoever. Because we have been subsidizing the spare capacity, the IPPs, instead of the subsidy going direct to the public. So when I see the kind of manufactured water crisis in Selangor, and we know one of the biggest motivations for UMNO to do it is for them to award Langat 2 contract. We know that this is another script being presented in 2012 instead of 1996. They have used this tactic all along. They will blackmail the public, they will go on massive misinformation campaign so that the public finally will turn and say, yes, we have to do this to avoid a certain crisis in the future. The only crisis is that UMNO knows they are going to lose. That's all. There's no crisis in this country. The only crisis is the crisis of confidence that we have in UMNO Barisan Nasional. That's why they are in hurry. That's why, like Mr. Kun says, they will try and they will try to award this as soon as possible. In the case of Langat 2, although Selangor government will withhold any approval, and they can't proceed with the project without our approval because it involves a huge tract of land that belongs to the state of Selangor. They will continue and proceed with the award of the project. And I dare say that in all probability, the one person, the one company who will get this is the golf buddy, which is Josh Ken. Because we know Josh Ken is a front runner in Langat 2 as well. And the other big project that Josh Ken most probably will also get is not the LRT. I've never told this before. Before this, I was quite concerned about being sued. By now, I just couldn't care less. I mean, you know, if anything happens, I only have to serve the sentence once, right? Concurrently. So I can say as many things as I want now. My suspicion and the information that I get from inside, from the other side, is that LRT contract worth 1.1 billion that Josh Ken has just backed is actually a prelude to a bigger contract. This is just a small contract to fill up Josh Ken's CV, to show that it actually has a project in railways. Because what Josh Ken wants in the end is the lucrative double tracking project from Gemas to Johor Bahru. That's worth about 8 billion. With the VO and so on, you can expect it will go up to about 11, 12 billion. Because the one in the north, from Ipoh to Padang Besar, actually doubled in price as well. Talks in town is that Josh Ken is the front runner in consortium with a company from China. The same company that Barisan Nasional previously kicked out and terminated the contract. That same company now has to come to Malaysia, but unless they pair with certain good friends of certain people, they will not be considered. I understood that they had agreed to do that, so they will rebid for the package, and Josh Ken this time around will not be disqualified because finally in its CV it has a track record of working on a rail project on LRT. And that's the reason why by hook or by crook it must get that 1 billion project in Ampak, so that allows them to be considered and subsequently awarded the more lucrative tender from Gemas to Johor Bahru. So ladies and gentlemen, my friends, people ask, my closing remarks, people ask, how are we going to fund everything that we promise? We are going to provide free education. Our calculation shows it's about 14 to 15 billion a year. We promise to lower down the fuel price. That will add an additional about 5 to 6 billion. We promise to get rid of the toll. The capital outlay could be quite high, but then again the operational expenses is more or less what the country is paying now, which is about 4 to 5 billion each year, what we are paying directly to the concession. UMNO Barisan Nasional will always ask, how are we going to fund this? Very simple. Get rid of Najib, get rid of Rosma, get rid of Jackson, get rid of Rosali, get rid of all the cronies, because in every single crony's hand, you have about 4 to 5 billion project. In every single one's hand. If you get rid 10 of them, you get 40 billion. Simple. I think not that easy. I mean, people ask, I mean, if I go and debate with people from UMNO, they say, that's simplistic, it's very simple, you know, it's easier said than done. I told them, not difficult at all, because we have done it in Selangor. People ask us, how did we manage to treble the state reserve from the 400 million when we took over in 2008, now reaching 2.1 billion ringgit in state reserve? Not difficult at all. What did we do? We went after every single crony and confiscated their land. As simple as that. They took the land from the state, they didn't pay the premium, they didn't pay cukai tanah, so we confiscated them. Last time around, UMNO Barisan Nasional gave these lands free of charge. When we took back, we revalue and we open tender the whole lands for development. Every single parcel usually costs about 2 to 300 million ringgit. If you confiscate from 5 people, that's 1.5 billion. That's how Tan Sri Khalid did it, by becoming the best chatty in Selangor. So, I think I stop there. I hope we have a full picture. Itu belum jadi along. If you become along, it's no worse lah. I mean, I think what is most important is for us to realize there's so much mismanagement and corruption in this country. And corruption does not know colors. Corruption does not know backgrounds. Corruption is all about greed. And I think unless Malaysians took a very strong stand about this, and I say this to all of you, if you do have an information with proof of corruption, do not hesitate come and see Datuk Sri Nizam, come and see Dr. Lee Boon Chai. I would like them to be in court together with me. But more and more people, please come forward, because unless we send a very strong message, you know this country is going to be robbed to the ground by UMNO and the goons in Barisan Nasional. With that, I say thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you again. I'll come to Ipoh again after Raya. Thank you very much.